Hello, Book 2. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Glenn. This is Glenn's Bookshelf. Wanted to do a video on my favorite author of 2025. That is an author that before this year I had never heard of, and that author is Liz Moore. You may know of her through a mini series that was produced and shown on the network Peacock, starring Amanda Seyfried, and it was called Long Bright River, which is also the name of one of her books, one of Liz Moore's books. And that story is about a police officer who is played by Amanda Seyfried. She is, I believe she lives in the Philadelphia area, if not in the city of Philadelphia itself. She is a early 30-ish police officer who is both on the trail of a potential serial killer of young women in the Philadelphia area. And also problematically, she is also trying to keep tabs on her younger sister who lives on the streets and has a drug problem. And those two storylines are, they potentially interact. And so the story follows the Amanda Seyfried's character as she is trying to find out who the killer is, and trying to sort of find her sister, make sure her sister's okay. And she's also navigating a kind of problematic relationship with her mother, who she is semi-estranged from. Her father, when we first meet the character in the story, it's uncertain where he is. So she's got some family problems. She's also dealing with some issues at work as a female police officer. And so it's a pretty fascinating story. I don't own a copy of the book, or else I would show it to you. I remember seeing this series advertised on Peacock, and I ended up watching an episode of that, and for whatever reason, I just got interested in reading the book first. I had never read this author. I had never heard of Liz Moore before this year. And so I got a copy of the book from the library, and I read that, and I really liked it. And then I read a second book by Liz Moore called Heft. And Heft is the story of a man named Arthur, who is morbidly obese. He is homebound. He has been living in his Brooklyn home for about 10 years. He never goes out. He gets he gets all his food delivered, and everything he needs to live by, he gets delivered to his home, and he has no social life. And his house he is also kind of a hoarder. So his home is in really bad shape, and we, through shifts in the time space of the book, we get to understand how the character Arthur, how this character wound up in his home, and why he doesn't go out, or why he hasn't been out, or what led him to that situation. He was a former teacher, and one of his former students gets in touch with him because she's worried about her son, who is, I think, 16, 17 years old, and wants to play pro baseball, but she wants to make sure he, is able to get into college, and so she kind of wants Arthur to, kind of mentor him, and so that becomes kind of the incentive for Arthur to kind of come out of his shell and begin to kind of get himself together and kind of take charge of his life. And the first thing, or one of the first things Arthur decides to do is bring in a housemaid, someone who will help him clean up. And so he eventually meets this maid that comes over and helps him out, and so he is able to sort of better his situation a little bit, and as the book goes on, we learn a little bit more about Arthur's relationship to this woman, this former student of his, and his desire to sort of be able to meet her again, although he's quite embarrassed about his his home life and what has happened to him over the past decade. And the story has, it's a very bittersweet story. Many of the characters have various problems in their lives, and I think the title Heft applies not only to the morbidly obese male character in the story, but it has an emotional significance as well, that how many of us are carrying sort of the heft of emotional damages that play themselves out in various addictions or other behaviors that we use to cope with a demanding and frightening world. And but I enjoyed that book a lot too. And the next two books I actually do own the copies of now, both Long Bright River and Heft I got from the library. Again, because I had not, since I wasn't familiar with Liz Moore's work, I was inclined to, let me check her books out of the library and see how I get on with them, and if I like them, maybe I'll buy them for myself. The next two books, I'm not sure which of these two I finished reading last. They are the two favorite books of hers. The most recent Liz Moore book that I think came out this year, 2024 actually. It's called The God of the Woods, and it's this book is also going to be made into a mini series, as I understand it, and I trust that it will be a good one. It was probably, of the books that I've read of hers, was from cover to cover the book that I thought was the most page turning. It was the book I enjoyed the most. Later I'll talk about another book that I think actually ended up being my favorite book of hers for different reasons. But The God of the Woods is just kind of a classic missing person, possible murder mystery. It involves a wealthy family from New York City, although the setting is mostly in, I think, like the Adirondacks area, in the woods, as you might suspect by the cover. And the key mystery involves a family whose, was it 14 or 15 years prior to where the book starts. The book starts in like the mid 70s, I think. And like back in the early 60s, the I think he was a teenager, that the teenage son of this family disappeared in the mountain areas. The couple goes on to have another child, and this child is a girl, and so in the mid 70s, this girl is 13 or 14, and then she disappears also. So the book follows a couple different timelines, and it's a little jumpy in terms of being told from kind of different points of view, or at least it focuses on different characters. And again, it does some jumps in the timeline between this 1960s and the 1970s. And but it's a really it's a really fascinating and suspenseful story. And we're not sure if did the did the boy who disappeared in the 60s, is he still alive? Where is he? What happened to him? And then obviously the girl that has just disappeared, what happened to her? Is there a common denominator? And then there are the people that are involved. There definitely are some class issues going on here. There are the rich people who is the central family, whose children have disappeared at different points in time. But then there are the sort of more lower class families and individuals who actually work at the camp and run the camp. And there are the different campers themselves that are involved in the story. So it was very entertaining. I really enjoyed reading this book a lot, and this was the first book by Liz Moore that I actually went out and bought, because I had read at least two prior books, and so I decided I liked Liz Moore has sort of entered. I think her books have sort of entered the field of anything she writes or publishes. I'm probably going to go out and buy, because I'm going to like it. So so I really enjoyed this story, and I'm very much looking forward to the mini series whenever that comes out. The fourth book of hers I want to talk about, I mentioned in a prior video. It's called The Unseen World, and this book I originally borrowed from the library as well, but because I liked it and wanted to have it in my collection, I went out and bought it. It's a much different story than The God of the Woods or Long Bright River. It is a little bit closer, I think, to the mood of the other book she wrote called Heft, although it's a much different story. This book is set, I think when it starts, it's in the early to mid 1980s. The central character is a young girl named Ada. She is 12 or 13. She is, I think, being like homeschooled by her father, although her father has a full-time job, as her father works at a university there in the Boston area, and he's a computer scientist, and he's involved in, I guess, the earliest efforts to create these thinking machines. And the father, there's no mother in the story, and that's sort of it's a little bit part of the mystery as we're getting acquainted with the characters. And it soon becomes apparent that the father is a little mysterious. There's a little mystery about him. We don't quite know where he's from or what his backstory is. But he and Ada have a very very close relationship. He's a good father by all estimates. Again, although Ada does not have a real active social life. She's a little secluded. She's very precocious, very, very smart and brilliant. But her father begins to kind of develop dementia or some related illness to where he just loses his memory and his ability to function. So he eventually is no longer able to do his job or even care for Ada. Ada goes to live with the family of one of her father's coworkers, who who takes very good care of Ada, and then Ada forms relationships with this woman's kids and begins to go to school and form relationships with the other children. And so a good part of the story is Ada kind of learning how to be more social and learning more about herself and how to act and behave and form relationships. At the same time, as her father deteriorates, Ada is wanting to know more about him. Why some things about she just doesn't have as much information as she would like, and some things about her father appear that she has long believed to have been true turn out to not be true, or things that she didn't know sort of start coming to light. And so part of the story is her own kind of coming of age, as well as sort of digging into who her father is or was, and how does she resolve that. And I think what's really powerful about the book, this is also a book that does a little jumping around in different timelines, although I think it does it a little bit better than The God of the Woods did it. I didn't find the jumping between timelines too distracting. I think if anything, it added more to the mystery and suspense of the book. It was, and the reason I sort of characterized The Unseen World as probably my favorite of the Liz Moore books I read this year, but yet it probably wasn't the most page-turning book when I was reading it. It sort of the power of the book didn't really come along until the ending of it, the last 50 to 100 pages. But where the story ultimately ends, as Ada grows up and learns about her father and goes into the world and becomes a professional in her own right, and then what happens afterward, just the way Liz Moore uses the timelines of the story is a lot of the power of this book. And I don't want to say anything more about that to avoid spoiling the story, but I just wanted to, before the year is out, I wanted to do a video about the books of Liz Moore that I read this year, that I became acquainted with this year. There is a fifth book by Liz Moore that actually I think it was her first, and that I have not read. It is called The Words of Every Song. So I have not read that book, but I have read 4 of the 5 books that Liz Moore has published, and really loved The Unseen World and The God of the Woods in particular, but I think all 4 books are really good. And I thought about doing this video as a tag video, or creating a tag for my favorite new author of the year, or new author being new to me author. But instead of doing that, what I thought I would just do at the end here is ask you to leave down in the comments if there were any books, any authors you read this year that that qualified as your favorite new author of the year, and what were they and why. I would really love to hear about those. And again, I would heartily recommend these books by Liz Moore. I will give a little bit, I will list the names, the titles in the description. And so there, that's all I wanted to say for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will be back again hopefully soon with another bookish video. Thanks. Bye-bye.